Hello, everybody. I'm Marie Speed. I'm editor of Boca magazine. And today I get to talk to Dr. Kitty Oliver, somebody who's iconic in South Florida. I've known for a while. She's a journalist and author, an oral historian. She's all this stuff. She's also a jazz singer, which is the coolest thing. She's got a PhD in comparative studies, and her specialty is race and ethnic communications. She's been on CNN, Black in America. She has her own company, Kitty O Enterprises, which specializes in cultural diversity issues. She's the director of the Race and Change Initiative at FAU. What else? She also hosts and produces the Crossing Cultures Changing Lives series on WBEC TV. And the reason we have her here today, well, lots of reasons, because number one, I mean, she's great to look at, but we are having a talk about how things are today, but also we have a program airing on Sunday, Kitty, that hones right in on Boca with an interracial friendship between two women in Boca. And it airs this Sunday night at 6:30 and again on Wednesday. It's on Comcast Channel 19 and youve Channel 63. So there's a nice local hook to this conversation. Today, I wanted to get Dr. Oliver's thoughts on how we are these days in light of all the recent turmoil, the reignition of Black Lives Matter. She's not political. She's not, I don't see you as, I see you as a unifier and a storyteller more than anything. And I just, in that vein, can you place us in this moment in America? What do you think we're seeing right now?
Well, hello to everyone, and thank you, Marie, for having me. As an oral historian, the whole nature of the work I do of collecting stories is all about dealing with communities and societies and people who are in a moment of transition. And we are in yet another moment of transition. And that is what's going on as our democracy is challenged once again to evolve. And it's an experience people of my generation have certainly dealt with. We went through I came of age with the civil rights movement and came out of segregation into integration as one of the first Black freshmen at the University of Florida, and all the tumultuous things that were going on then, and to Black power, women's rights, anti-war movement. So we're seeing essentially unheard voices longing to be heard. And sometimes what they're saying, it can be painful, and the listening can be painful too. But I also see that we're in a process of change and promise, looking at the different alliances that have been formed, and the across generations and across races and colors and cultures, that's telling us something about how we are willing now to embrace more voices, or at least begin to hear them and go through the pain of that hearing, hopefully to come out on the other side with creating some change as a result. So the work that I do, I call it race and change work for that reason, because the rhetoric of race is so strong and embedded in our culture, and we have such a way of talking about it that is confrontational enough to shut it down. And every time we have something happening like we're beginning to see now, where people are opening up, that's the kind of thing that gives me hope, because I think there's a way we can talk about race and differences that can actually bring us together. If we can do it in a non-confrontational way, looking at hopeful steps that keep us moving forward. So
what a concept.
Yeah, within all of this, I see hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how have you seen race relations evolve maybe over the past 30 years in South Florida? I mean, personally, how have things changed or not changed?
Well, I think things definitely have changed, and things always change. And that's another way of talking about it that kind of keeps us stuck. Change is not some one event. and then we move on to something else. Change is always an evolution. It's a moving forward, and then we maybe move back a little bit and we regroup, and then we take strides ahead. So when I look at South Florida, because this became my home after graduating from the University of Florida, I can say that we had a black-white lines and perception of the world and life and how it operated. And by the 1990s, all of that down here had really broken open because of the multicultural society that just
Right.
was mushrooming. And people were really stymied by it because you were seeing the difference. You didn't know how to interpret it. The fearful way would always be that this is terrible, this is ruining our way of life. But there was also a movement to try to understand what was happening. And that's sort of where I stepped into the area to begin to ask and listen to hear some of the experiences people had had with these shifts and changes that were occurring, to see if there was some commonality of the stories as a result. So how things have evolved is we became more and more diverse. The differences perhaps taking on new characters. We had interracial interactions. We had issues of color and of economics and class and of culture or language and religion, all of those layers interacting. And then we began to see that within those white, black, Hispanic, and Asian categories, you had intra-racial and intra-ethnic issues to deal with. So it's a complex ball of wax we have put together as human beings. But I find it fascinating as a storyteller.
Well, I know, and your work reflects that. What projects are you working on that reflect on our need to heal and evolve when it comes to race in South Florida? And what do you think works the best in your experience of doing this? What things do you do that you really see results from?
Well, the projects and the work has really evolved as well, because at one time, a lot of people would remember you had diversity workshops, and there were those, there
Right,
was
right.
on that. And oral history, and joining the Oral History Association and getting the input nationally and internationally of all this work that was being done in communities and get community voices, that really got me engaged in the idea that I could talk to people from a variety of Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, and Native backgrounds, ask them the same questions about their life experiences, and discover that all of us have had experiences with differences in one way or another. And as our lives progress, the differences may change and our reaction and ability to deal with them may change. But discovering that nobody had really asked them about this before, not what you think about race, but what have you experienced? What has your life been like? What have your experiences been like? The discovery, which has led me to the work that I'm doing now, was that the stories are not always as predictable as you may think. You don't always have people of color who have stories of conflict or process it as being victimization. You don't always have stories of bigotry and racism within those of the majority culture who have processed it that way. So without any expectations, the ability to open this discussion or conversation of race to a wide range of voices, whatever your experience was, became the most exciting part of it. So the work evolved into not only collecting life histories, life stories, and then talking about race experiences within that person's life, but creating an archive. And now I have over 125 interviews with whites, blacks, Hispanics, and Asians from a variety of backgrounds, Caribbeans and all. It is the largest of its kind and scope in the country.
Wow.
And that was not an intention, but it was discovering how people, as I began it, wanted to talk. So I started working alone. Then I started teaching this at FAU, getting students, training them to do it, and then going to communities and training them. And so we've been to many South Florida communities collecting those stories in the Glades, Delray Beach, Boca, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, and I even went to Ghana, West Africa.
Wow.
Talk to people about race, even though seemingly one race, but of course ethnicity. Race and ethnicity are intertwined. It's really race-ethnicity
Yeah, yeah.
all together. And out of the archives and people wanting to hear the stories, I discovered that young people were really hungry to hear history presented in a way they could relate to. So I started doing presentations in communities and schools, and then collecting young people's stories. So that became the Race and Change Initiative, and the website and the radio programs, and there are 58 programs up there now of teenagers from 14, 13, 14 years old up through college, just making their own programs about their race relations experiences. So that brings me the most joy in terms of that and one other, but getting the young people involved, that their voices are also important, and they then respond so to the elder stories because they see, oh yeah, I could relate to that, but here's how I'm experiencing it, or, you know, mine is much different, but I can understand now what my parents or grandparents were telling me. And the other part of the work that has been so exciting has been doing presentations and bringing more of the arts into the presentation to touch hearts in a different way. Still talking about this serious subject, but talking about it as a storyteller, as a singer, as a performer, and going to audiences that you would never expect. I went to a farm workers group. They wanted in Florida, Central Florida, they wanted to bring together the Hispanic, Haitian, and African American workers who were not talking to them at all, each other at all.
Yeah, yeah.
They created an event, and with my Race and Change presentation, and brought them together for the first time, had some food, invited them, and they packed the place. They ran out of
That's
food,
awesome.
everything, first time to get together. Going to white audiences who admit, and by that I mean they live in communities that are isolated racially in some
Hmm.
way, but filling the house. They want to know, they want to hear the voices, and they want to see the videos of people and hear what others are saying. And now I'm on the Humanities Speakers Bureau for the state of Montana.
That's
And they
awesome.
have such a large indigenous
What
community.
was there anybody that you interviewed? I mean, I have a special soft spot for oral histories, and that's if I could do anything all day long, that would be it. I love to read them. I like to hear people talk. Was there anybody you ever met that you found particularly moving, and all the people you've interviewed, a story that maybe you couldn't get out of your head?
Oh my goodness.
So
Now
many.
to me, because to me, collecting stories is a sacred enterprise. And when you go into someone's life in that way, they become a part of you and you become a part of their lives. So families have invited me to their homes and to let me know when people have passed, narrators, and how much it meant to them. But there's one person, it's a gentleman in Hollywood, and he's about my age, and he is white and Southern and grew up, you know, with similar experiences on the other side of the track. And he was one of the first people I interviewed when I started the project. And he told me, he said, I have been thinking about nothing else since you called and asked me to do this. And essentially, you know, I don't know what I'm going to be able to lend to it, but I'm going to try. And so this Bob, I met him around 2000 when I did the television series, Crossing Cultures, Changing Lives. I had a chance to interview him again. He talked about a racial experience with a guy in that high school when it was first integrated. I had a chance to bring him together with that Black
What
guy
happened? What happened?
later. It was, I didn't realize how touching it was going to be for the Black student, the former basketball student. He had a lot of bruises from that experience, socially because he faced so many problems in his neighborhood for hanging out with the white basketball players or the cheerleaders, and he didn't feel accepted at the school except when he was playing ball. So he was a little reluctant to get together with them. And it was a healing thing for him, he said. It
So
truly
in
was.
high school, they had been at odds with each other? You mean they had
Well, they
been...
were on the team. The two black students had been recruited. Essentially, they did some manipulation to get them to come and be at that school and be on the team. So you had these two, as Bob explained, these two kids coming from that you didn't know coming in, and it seemed like the coach was letting them play more, and there was the fear of drinking after a Black person when they were all drinking in the water squirt bottles at the time, and he wouldn't drink, and all of that, and just not knowing as he looked back where those negative messages had come, because he knew a Black person, his father, who worked for his father, but just how he processed that. So there were that whole idea that he missed an opportunity to become friends with the Black guy because of the wall that was there. But at this point, they were able to strike up at least a talking, friendship later on. So that's probably always my favorite story, because we filmed them playing basketball in the gym.
Oh, I love that. So good. I'm glad we got a story out of Dr. Oliver, and she's a storyteller. So that's perfect. I bet you have a million of them, as they say. I love to listen to you. So when it's all said and done, and this will be my last question, what will you have considered your life's work to be? I know you're so many different things, Dr. Oliver. I mean, from your jazz singing to you've been a journalist, you've been all of it. But what is at the core of what you've tried to do?
Well, I like to say that I talk about race in a hopeful way, because I don't see our differences as being the impediment that in the way it's so often talked about. And I think if I could create an environment where people can feel comfortable enough to let the essence of the human goodness that is in us come out, that is a major work for me, even if just for a moment, to remember our mutual humanity. And as they say, we're all related, yes, and we're the original dysfunctional family as humans. So maybe I'm one of those peacemakers in the family that goes. But no, but at the core of it too, to combat racism and injustice that permeates our society and our systems and all, we need all of the tools we can get. Some of them we see on the news and we see happening and all that, but maybe in some little way, I'm offering yet another tool you can use to help us, remind us of just how great we can be.
Well, I think you're achieving that work every single day, and we can't thank you enough for speaking with us. And we need to get you back in the magazine because you have a lot to say, and I miss talking with you. Thank you so much for visiting with us today, Dr. Kitty Oliver. And don't forget to tune in on Sunday night. What time? 6:30 Sunday night on WBEC TV. And you get to see
Crossing Cultures, Changing Lives.
Not too many syllables for me, but that's it. Mostly you get to see her. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
All righty.